Guys, FrazierDanger here. I'm going to go over real quick how to solder together a slime tracker on the Hyperion platform with the B&O-085s. It should be the same across the IMUs for the most part. A little difference here and there, but mostly about the same, I'd say. And without further ado, here we go. This is our board setup, the TP4056, the B&O-085, and the D1 Mini. I've chosen USB-C for the TP4056. I recommend you do as well. I've chosen the B&O-085. If you can afford it, I recommend you do that as well. And I've chosen the D1 Mini with the micro USB. I don't see any reason not to go with the micro USB. Certainly, most of the platforms are going to be built for the micro USB D1 Mini version. It's what's recommended in the Discord, and I hadn't had any issues with it. It was actually a fairly simple, straightforward process, which I got going. So, side note real quick, the lithium polymer battery I'm using is not listed or recommended anywhere in the specifications, but it does fit the Hyperion platform. Maybe it's got a little wobble to and fro. Maybe that's one of the issues. I forget exactly what the problem was, or if there ever was one, but it does fit, and I can get them for relatively cheap. So, a couple more side notes here. Make sure you're getting diodes. You want to protect the battery while the while the thing is charging in case you leave it on. That's what these diodes are for. And make sure you get a resistor. You want to see how much battery life you have left. It's just nice. I've never had an issue with running out of battery life. Third, make sure you get switches that fit the platform you're using. And don't make that mistake. All right. So other than that, rosin core solder, whatever. You'll want a soldering iron, of course, and a desoldering gun. That'll come in handy. Now, when you are working with your wires, and you'll need a bunch of wire for little short loops, you will want to tin them every time, and that's just because it allows the solder to flow better into the wire when you are soldering points on the board. So it's a connectivity issue. If you don't, you might have some wobble with your wires. I just recommend doing it every single time. As a matter of fact, it's hardly a recommendation. You're going to need to. All right, so if you got good wire, or wire that is intended to be used for this sort of function, it will easily strip with your fingernails. You will not have to do any extra hard work to do that. If you need to, you can use a razor blade to circle around wire. If you're using source wire from something else, that's up to you. I wouldn't recommend it just because, you want to use wire that's purpose-built, right? Nice and flexible. You don't want to have to sit there and cram wire in. For instance, here is a great example. This wire would have functioned just fine for this purpose, but it's so hard. It's absolutely impossible to work with. And you can see that it's solid copper on the inside. So it just would have been difficult to deal with. I wouldn't recommend it. So, all that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So I've got this freshly stripped piece here. You're going to want to go ahead and take your soldering gun, iron or whatever, and just lightly graze, just like that. Make sure you've got a fan on, by the way. Don't want to be breathing this stuff in. I've actually had clinical heavy metal poisoning. It's not fun. Shortened your lifespan, and all around fucks with you. It can make you real sick in the head too. Don't risk it. All right. So this part we're going to go ahead and fast forward through as I sit there and tin the wires individually. And we'll be back. And as a side note, when you're doing this, it's actually more efficient to just use your third hand to hold as many wires as possible. Remember that twist. Give them a twist a little before you start tinning them, because you want the wire to be as compact as possible when you are inserting them into the solder points, I guess. I'm going to call them data points, but they're not all data points. Some of them are just power. And then just give them a good spread. Make sure, like I said, they're twisted. And then you can easily just go about like this, tapping them. Don't have to use a tremendous amount either. Just a little bit. I have never done a project like this until I started with the Slime VR trackers, outside of modifying a GameCube many years ago, and I did not do a very good job. I was using a frankly piss-poor soldering iron, and I wouldn't recommend it. Makes you think that you can't do something when you can. Working with the right tools is extremely important. Make sure you're doing that. Let the professionals work with the wrong tools. They know how to do it. Okay, so we're going to start here. This is really important. So you've got the two sides on either end with the LEDs here. One of them is going to light up red, one of them is going to light up blue. Blue means charged, red means charging. So this is a really cool part. I learned this from a video I watched. I'll put it in the credits to make sure everybody can see down there who I've got this from. They did it a lot more complicated than I'm going to bother doing it. I don't think it's necessary to sit there and be all ginger with the bending. These things are quite hardy, really. So what you'll do is you'll take them down like this. Then you'll just make sure they line up and match. Okay. And frankly, we can play nice with that. We just needed to make sure that they're bent over like that. Got that nice little 90-degree angle. It's a soft 90 degrees. So this is where that third hand is going to come in handy. So let's see if you can see this little portion of the hand. You sure can. Okay. I like to use it like this. So I'll grab a little bit of solder. Hopefully y'all were able to see me tinning earlier. It's possible you couldn't. Let's recenter a little bit. Don't need the battery in full view quite yet. Alright, so what you'll do is you just grab a little solder right off that thing here, right? And then you just bring it right through. Bang. And you want that as far down as possible. I'm already doing a piss poor job of it, but hey, whatever, it'll be fine. So, and just like that, and then you bring the other one through, same way. Make sure these are facing towards each other. All right, see that little gray band there? You want it facing towards itself. It's one of those elements I think that'll be fairly universal in almost all the setups you're going to accomplish, or rather encounter, outside of maybe PCB builds. PCB builds are cool. I'd like to try one soon. I think I will. So that did not come in high enough. We have to melt that solder a little bit and see if we can't get it in. There we go. Perfect. So, as far as I know, these little things are not going to be able to short anything. So you're going to bend it just like that. Okay. You can do this in either step. I'm going to do it now. You want to take a little bit more and just bring that solder, just walk that solder right up that thing there. It'll give it a little bit more, just the tiniest bit more strength. Because you're not soldering to a braided wire here, so there's nothing to create friction, or rather to stabilize the actual piece there, if you don't do it like that. Now, I'm sure people might say, oh, this soldering job isn't that great. It's not. Actually, most of my other solder, I was a little bit more fastidious initially. However, it will work. So then you want to go ahead and just snip it right there, and snip it right there. And you might end up snipping it again. Like I'm going to have to snip it again right here. Hopefully it's visible. Let's see if you can't get a better view. That right there, that's what that's supposed to look like. You want those two touching each other just like that. Now, you're going to take your blue, in my case blue I guess, wire, and you're going to take that and you're going to wrap it right around that thing. Wrap it right around. And then use whatever you can use to kind of get it back around there. I'm sure there's a better way to do this. I didn't bother figuring one out because if it works, it works. I'm not going to be doing this all day. We don't need to industrialize the manufacturing these little things today. We just need it to work. So You can see how it is all pieced up there. Let's see if we can get a little better focus maybe. Yeah. All right. So working from that position, we grab a little bit of solder right here, and we just pop it right there. Just bang. Just enough to get it all solidified on there. And you may have to come in and refinangle the thing to give it a little bit more of a hard point. Ultimately, it needs to bridge both diodes, but there's solder on both, because you don't want that wire moving around like it's doing on me. I'm going to end up using way too much solder on this thing, but it'll all work out in the end. There we go. Perfect. There we go. Okay. And you can clean that up a little bit with snippers if you feel like you need to. In my case, I will clean it up real quick. Get the little end of the wire out. Bang. Perfect. Let's double check that. See, this is something you want to watch out for. I do have drift there. I should have probably applied a little bit right to the edge on the diodes. You can see me making mistakes too. That is much better. You don't want that solder moving around. It's just not a good connection otherwise. Now, let's move on. I take almost all my wires off the IMU itself, but in this case, it just feels like it's the right thing to do to have it set up like that. So, starting here, this is a tinned wire. We're going to slot it through the thing. You're not going to get a good, at least I don't, end on the first snip like that. So I don't do it like that. And we'll go ahead and like this. So this lead runs to what I understand is the positive of the battery. It also runs to the Weemos and the IMU itself. This is exactly why we like to have this set up right here, or I do. No mouse in my pocket today. Yes, it is meticulous. You want to be sure you're not dooting around too much and creating cross connections. I done here. Try not to short your boards. Shouldn't be too much of an issue if you're doing well. It's been a minute since I've done this. There you go. Just a little bit of thing. You probably can't see it very well. There was the slightest bit of, yeah, see. Clean those up, make sure they're not an issue. All right. Now get your white wire, or in my case again, white, into the negative there. You'll want to clean that up just like I was saying before. A little bit of solder on there. Pop. And if you do end up doing a little bit of crossways on that, you can clean it up by just grabbing some off off the contact. It does tend to stick to the soldering iron a little bit, so it gives us a little bit of grace. Incidentally, the sponge is wet. I wish I had thought about that previously. I did not realize it was supposed to be wet. I felt like a joker when I realized that one. Okay. Yep, we're going to go ahead and throw the black lead on there as well. This black lead leads to the other side of the switch. Or rather, one side of this switch. Sure that we've got a good focus here. Yeah, there we go. Oh, this is staying in focus. It's not. We're going to have an issue, aren't we? Double check here. Just like that. And you can move it around while you're torquing it. It gets a little bit of solder on the other side. And kind of brings it through. At least it was useful for me. All right. So that's our board. We will wait to do the cleanup on that. As you can see, no spin on those. Check them for spin when you're done. If you've got spin, it's not in there right. Now on to our B&O 085. Be careful with your boards. They're $12 a piece. The other ones are pennies practically, but these are expensive. So just be careful. I lost one during the initial processing. We are going to start with the int wire. It's down at the bottom there. So feed it to the top. The B&Os have much smaller holes, so it's a lot less forgiving. Yeah, the solder points on these are a lot smaller. So if you've not done an excellent job tinning the wire and you're having issues getting in there, well, I can try it again, because you don't want to force it. You don't want wires hanging out the other side either, which is it's easy to do. It's easy to have little extra wires hanging out there. Little sharding wires. You'll see them if you look at them real close, but we're not going to do that. So we're not going to have that issue. All right, that is in there. All right, next is, in my lineup, we do yellow next. Yellow is the SDA wire. There we go, just like that. Bang. Beautiful. All right. After that, I am going for the ground. No, actually, this is the SCL wire in this case. Usually green is ground, in my experience, at least in home wiring. Check this out. This is a perfect example of me screwing up. Look at that. It was a beautiful, beautiful entry, but I forgot to make sure that I didn't have it in the wrong port, and so I was getting ready to wire up the SDO. That's okay. It's a great opportunity to use this. I'm fairly sure you can see there that it's mostly cleaned that up, and it'll be fine. All right. Let's try that again. Perfect. All right. Green. There we go. And you can just barely see our worst enemy there. It's that little stranded wire. Maybe you'll be able to see it, maybe not. You can probably see a tiny little stranded wire hanging off that. Fortunately, we won't have any problem with that because we're going to clip those things so close, It'll never have the chance. Once you're done clipping, by the way, give them a little rotation, just like on the TP4056. When we go back to do that, we'll be doing it again there. This is just QOL stuff, though. All right. Now we're moving back onto the ground. Of course, the ground is black. That actually makes the most sense now that I'm thinking about it. The DC system, there is no Earth. Well, in this style of DC system. Now, some of you, if you've ever done this before, are cringing right now. Because I disconnected those points, but that's okay. It's actually pretty easy to just desolder and uncouple them. And you'll probably make that mistake a bunch of times yourself if this is your first time. Lord knows I did. Which is why I completely and wholeheartedly recommend the use, again, of the soldering gun. Point in fact, by the way, when you're using the soldering gun, you'll want to use the soldering point on the place where you've actually thrown the solder. Bang. Perfect. You can probably see it's looking good again. So, all right. And I use the red wire on the 3V3 volt. 3 volt 3. I'm no electrician. I'm no engineer. I am following other people's tutorials and building up a holistic understanding of what is going on based on that. Just like you probably are. All right. Here we go. That is our last solder point on this board. So, just like before, go back in there. Clean them up a little bit. Bang. Don't have to get it too close. You just want it to be able to sit snugly in the board. As you can see, that's just what it's going to do. Perfect. Okay. Moving on. We have our TP4056 and our BNO 085, the IMU, all set up. This one's a whole lot less complicated. It's really only got one point that we've actually got to worry with. That is the A0 slot. Let's back over. A0. Now this is just like before with the diode, except we're going to do it a little differently. So the way I like to do this, I like to connect it to a red wire right off the bat. I use heat shrink to do that. So I'm going to, we'll get the order of operations a little bit messy here, but that's okay. I don't like the heat shrink to be too long, obviously, because I'm going to end up wrapping this thing right down this way. It's going to come down and across. This red wires, these red wires all feed into each other for me. So sometimes that's the best you can do. Sometimes you just gotta roll with it. Don't get bogged down in the small stuff. It works, and it will work. Now, we'll go ahead and throw it right here. Get that heat shrink on there. Alrighty, just like that. Now you haven't got to worry about it shorting out on anything. All right, back to the Weemos board and the A0 slot. All right, so you'll throw that in there through the A0, like so. And you don't want to hit anything else, but as far as I know, that resistor is not going to short anything out, so you might not have an issue if you do it like that. We don't use the D0 slot, we do use the D5, so you'll get it kind of in there, and then you'll want to bend it out of your way in order to really give yourself some access. All right. Just like before, you want a little bit of a bridge on top of that to keep it from moving around too much later. So, and then just torque it a little bit out of the way, because we are at the point now where we're going to start putting together the actual boards. Now, one thing about this section of the work, here, just a little snip, nothing heavy. Don't get too excited with it because it has to sit in there, but it definitely needs to be still connected to the board. So we're going to go ahead and sample our layout. Bang, just like that. Bang. Look at that. It's all going to fit in just perfectly. So you'll want to take the wires and just kind of lead them over. Get a look at how they're going to mesh, right? So this goes into the 5-volt. That is this piece right here. So you'll want it to be about yay long. See? So just take a little bit of wire, just like kind of like stringing a guitar, actually. So you'll give it a little bit of a leeway. Snip. You've got just enough wire. Pry that piece off there. Bang. Get your little thing out. And you'll spin it just like everything else. And then you'll go to tin it. We're going to do that all at once. So, yeah. Let's see what else here. Now, the int wire here. Is that well enough soldered? Well, it certainly is now. Actually, what I've done. So if you need to fix a little bit of maybe you've got too much lead out on the wire, you can take it out, put a little bit of pressure on it, and it'll feed it back into the board a little bit. Just watch out. Make sure you're not shorting anything out while you're doing that. Nobody said it wouldn't be frustrating. You're soldering tiny little points on tiny little board, and putting it together and whirling around at the speed of you're moving, doing whatever, God knows what. Sometimes you just have to keep rolling with the punches. At any rate, we take our int wire and we bring it around town, just like that. And we're going to give it just a little bit more lead. Over top of that, we've got the D5 strip. Might be a little too much. I doubt it, though. Okay. Same thing here with the yellow wire, which runs to your D2. And that's just a little quick skip and a hop. See there? That's your D2 on your Weemos. Bang. So we can just undress it right there. Bang. Done. Bear in mind, this is probably the most tension the board will ever be under. So, you know, treat it gingerly so you're not going to beat it up, because it's not meant to be handling a huge amount of stress. Let's see. D1 for green, obviously. Well, maybe not obviously, huh? But again, that's just another little jumper, essentially. So I just bring it around and strip. Bang. And I wouldn't recommend tinning these all the way up and down as they are. I would just cut them, then tin them, and then cut them again when you're ready. coming up to the single most complicated point of the entire journey. That is, we have a bridge connection from the ground to the switch from the B&O. Of course, it's not actually that difficult of a solder point, really, but you will need to do some finagling. So let's end this journey though with 3v3. 3v3. Again, bring it over and around. You want this thing coming up and around there, see? So it's actually almost maxing out the thing. I'm going to play it on the safe side and just kind of do a normal length of wire for tinning in this case. That just happens to be how it worked out for me. This is about the length of wire that I would recommend using. It gives you enough room to play, and yet you probably won't have to resolder anything because it's too short. All right. So this is the difficult part. The wire from the B&O, which I'm going to keep it about that length because I really don't want any trouble later. The wire from the B&O is going to come into the ground slot here. You can see the G, okay? But at the same time, you're going to be running another wire out from the ground point into the switch, the other side of that switch. So one point of the ground point where the switch comes in on the TP4056, and the other point comes off of the Weemos board. So fairly simple arrangement either way. Take these two, get them in there, bang. Watch out for stranding wire on this one. That's right, I didn't tin this one. Let's tin it real quick. Didn't tin any of these. In fact, let's tin them all. This is all very professional, as you can see. I don't want to call myself an expert at this craft, but you're forcing my hand. So like I said, cut them. About the length you think you're going to use. All right, you want to make sure you breathe in those fumes real good, though, okay? They're sweet. Tastes sweet in my mouth as I'm breathing it in. I can feel the change happening. Reminds me of the good old days. All right. Let's see here. As I said, this part is genuinely the most complicated. Don't worry, this particular wire is already tinned. Just want to take a little bit of pressure down there, and hopefully that'll help you get this black wire in. Like I said, watch out for any stranding. Now, once you've got them both in there, give them a twist around each other, if you can help it without putting pressure on the contact points that they're on outside of that. Well, the other one anyway. And you want to make sure that they don't slop out a little bit. You don't want too much excess wire coming out of that other end. All right, where's my solder? Fortunately, you can grab solder like this, and bang, you're in business. And actually, that came out quite well. I'm still going to dress it out a little bit more, though, because I'm a bit paranoid. Okay, perfect. Let's give it a little snip. Make sure. Oh, yeah, that looks beautiful. I don't know if that's going to be close enough to jump the wires. There we go. Perfect. Side by side. FYI, this is not how I did it previous times. And actually, now that I'm looking at it, it doesn't look like it's going to work out that well for me. That's okay. I actually did it like this Stomach button for punishment. But, you know, you put a little pressure on it. Hold it with your thumb and forefinger and middle finger, and you'll get a good enough point. You just want that, just like that. Bang. All right, we got that 3v3 slot coming in right here. Same thing, grab a little solder and bring it over. Your hands will have enough shake on them and it'll probably work the solder into the point on its own, which means less work for you. Thank God for the jitters, right? Okay. There is our D1 point. Bang. Coming in, we got D2. Perfect. It looks like we're done with that portion. All right. Cool, and now we're going to work our TP4056 wiring into the rest of the board. So I'm going to do the same way I've been doing it. I'm going to tin this thing right here. Solder, just get that in there. All right, this blue wire goes into the 5-volt point. Checking that, yeah. 5-volt point. Look at that. It ain't gonna fit because oh, it fit. There we go. Hopefully, most of this is fairly visible. It's possible it's not, but at least a step-by-step guide on how to achieve this build. You can kind of get a sense for how it's supposed to be done, huh? Okay. Now. Right. That's where that meets up. So I like to bring the wire for the A0 resistor in here, back up and around. Just seems to work for me. And what we're going to do is we're going to do the rest of this build inside of the tray. Perfect. Might have left a little too much slack on some of these. It's going to be all right, though. So, okay. First things first. In this board setup, you're going to want the lead for the battery stacked in here. Throw the tray in. You might have to take the TP4056 out of the tray or just not put it in the first place so that you can sneak this in. Bang, there you go. You got a little slot to work that into. Make sure we're still recording here, yep. Perfect. Okay. I said perfect. There we go, yeah. Now it's perfect. Okay. Look at the beauty of that. In my case, you just want to make sure that the board is setting in properly, or rather the actual tray, before you do any more I had this issue before. I solved it fairly easily. You just have to sand down the back of the board. But it's probably not going to be an issue if you're printing the thing with an FDM printer. The resin printers are they're sometimes pretty wacky. Okay. So we want about that much lead or so, more from the red point. And we want slightly less on the black. That's the negative, obviously. So, now, this is the point where you should probably have a razor blade. But in lieu of that, I think we can make do. There we go. Yeah. Just be careful, don't snip the wire on some of this stuff. The braided wire from the bats are going to be tremendously more difficult to unsheath. They're not meant to be unsheathed. They are purpose-built. I mean, you saw I snipped that connector off without even thinking about it. Well, that's because I don't have the board set up. If you were using a PCB, though, you would definitely want to use the proper board setup. Lose any wiring in that? Nope. Nope. All good. Okay. You're going to end up tinning these as well. Don't connect them. Do not cross-connect those things. I don't know what that would happen. Probably a short circuit protection board on the inside of there. They seem to all have them. In fact, here's another such battery. Imagine that's a short circuit protection board of some kind. All right. I'm just trying to remember how the rest of this goes. Okay. White to black here. So that's about right. So start our wire. As you can see, different verse, same as the first. Now there's two different ways to connect wires when they're set up like that. I'm going to do it the most ass way possible. I'm just double checking my schematics over here, making sure I'm doing it right. I am. Okay. Another thing you're going to do is just bring this little black wire back up and around and through, because we're getting ready to begin soldering this thing to a switch in a second. Okay. Now comes the fun part. These three wires have to come together. It's not a tremendously difficult job. I think the hardest part about it is making sure that it sits inside the board properly, or rather the platform. So, twist, twist, twist. All right. Now, these are setting up. I think I can get away with just the regular length of wire without doing any cutting. This thing's going to be crammed in there, but it is how it is. You just watch out for any shorts. You'll know if you have a short because it'll be fairly obvious. Okay. I like to leave a lot of space on these two, mostly because, well, they're your switches, and you got to wire them, and they're a tough solder actually. I could have soldered this to begin with, like first, but as you can see, it's a tough solder. You have to take this tiny little piece here, grab it up on there. All right. It doesn't matter which direction, as far as I know. If it does, well, I've been fucking up the entire time. And I tend to take the lead from the Weemos to the middle point. Again, since it doesn't really matter what direction, it probably doesn't matter at all. I'm going to cut. Tin. All right. Don't do that. Don't do that. All right. Same thing here. Take that lead off. You want it in the Hyperion form. You want it about like right there, kind of hanging off the board at the end. Sorry if this is kind of coming out of center of the video. It's sort of an impromptu thing I'm doing just to do it. I struggled I struggled to find the confidence to do this. Actually, it was very daunting at first. I had bought all these components and I had it in front of me and I was staring at it. Finally, a friend was getting excited about it. And I was equally excited and said, "Hey, let's do it." So, okay. You'll want this. This is more heat shrink. Same stuff I just used on the gator clips. So drop that on there. Same thing here. Did I tin that already? No, I did not. Okay. All right. Perfect. Now, bring this down a little bit. It's going to make it difficult to see. I'll try to bend it so that it's a little easier to see. You're going to sit there, just like me. And you're going to take those leads. You're going to make sure that they're on there, but they're not too long. You're going to take just the tiniest bit of solder. Is this visible? I think it's visible. Just make double sure. You're going to take just a tiny bit of solder. You're just going to dab it right on there. And you're going to hold it. And you're going to do the best you can, holding it strongly and firmly. All right, same thing here. In this case, I've got it kind of warped out. Flip it back around. Nope, look at that. We already dropped the connection. It's okay, it's to be expected, to be honest. So you want to come back in, take your point. It actually helps a little bit. I forgot about this. If you take a little bit of solder and you dial it on the switch itself to start with. So, likes like. Here we go. Perfect. Yeah, don't worry if you get any solder on the other side of the switch. It's not going to make a connection with anything. You can even cut it off. In fact, I recommend you do. All right, let's try this again. By no means is that the easiest part of the soldering. I might have made it look easy. Maybe I made it look hard. At any rate, it is something that you might struggle with a little bit, especially if you can't keep your hands still. Which, first time I did this, I was in here breathing these nice little fumes in, and believe me, it took a little bit to keep myself steady enough to do it. Now, you might ask yourself, why am I cutting that? I'm just going to end up having to cause myself a problem later. Well, I don't want to get this jacket on there and then find out, oh, it ain't going to work. Because there's a little wall right here, and that wall is going to cause me an issue. Frankly, you don't have to do this part, but I always do. For the wire to be wrapped around there nice and tight, I can be confident that it's not going to play a game later. All right. Now, just however you can get it in there, to be honest. So, whatever finangles that little thing in there. Just get it in there, and then you just drop it in the slot. This is going to be tough every time. The tolerances on this are so severe. They feel like crunch. I probably actually just desoldered the connection on there, but it's going to be so tight because of that heat shrink. It's not going to matter. And we can test that now. Nope, still good. There we go. Bam. Alrighty. We're almost done. That's exciting. This is the final tracker I'll be putting together for my own setup. And I felt, as I said, the need to help people out a little bit. When you're doing this, by the way, make sure that that switch is off. It's not, well, I messed up plenty of times and had it on while I was sitting there putting all this together, but it can't be good for it, you know? So, cut your points. Wrap them. Tin them. There are no more solder points on this that are not wire to wire. But the wires will connect better to each other if they're tinned. Okay. Let's go. Grab. Press my heat shrink. Ah, there it is. Whatever heat shrink you can find is fine. Obviously, we're working with really tiny wires, so the tinier the better. Okay. Get these 2 points together, just like that. Give them a tiny bit of a spin here, just to hold them on. If you can't get it spin, because they're tinned, and it's the second time maybe you didn't account for it. It's the second time you didn't account for the fact that they're tinned already, and so you're not going to get too much spin out of them. Don't really matter. Looking goofy is part of the job description of doing a tutorial video on something you barely, you just started doing yourself, you know? Put a little bit of that on there. Don't get ahead of yourself, though. You have some heat shrink to throw on there. Cool. All right. Hopefully that didn't burn off all the resin on that. Now that was the most ass way to do that possible, because frankly, I should have spun it at least to give it a little bit more reinforcement, but it's going to be just fine. So give it a little bit of a pop, just like that. This is 3:1 marine tubing, and it's just slightly oversized for my application here, which is unfortunate, but who cares? It'll be fine. Okay. And then we have the final piece here. I'm just going to vertically connect these. I don't see any reason why I should sit there and try to create a point-to-point connection when I can just connect them like that. A little wire wrap. Again, maybe you're cringing at that if you're a veteran. Certainly I've been bitched at for a number of things by people who actually know what they're doing in their respective fields, mechanics, and so on and so forth. But ultimately, you know, it's a matter of taste. You're not going to be seeing these stuff very often, and surely you're not going to be messing with it very much. So, all right. It should be a solid blue when I go to turn it on. Oh, I'm sorry, not solid blue. It's supposed to do two flashing lights. That is it. It is done. It is ready to be pulled out. You take your little screwdriver up some other point here and grab that out. You will go ahead and connect it to your computer using the micro USB. You will use the flash point, and you will be done. I tend to use a little hot glue to keep the lids in on these cases, but Otherwise, I have no more recommendations. Let's just make sure the lid fits. Maybe there's some oversight I've made here. Maybe everything's just slightly too wonky, and I'm gonna have to walk around with this tracker open wire, bare exposed. I'm not gonna do that. Oh boy. Oh, did I break something? No. Okay. Part of the problem with printing these things with the resin is that the directions are all different. Awesome. Okay, the lid fits. Let's do one thing here and actually use a switch. Oh, that might be the tightest fit I have yet achieved, frankly. Perfect. Yeah, the tolerances on this case are just unreal. Perfect. And let's just one more time. Bang. Double flash every time. We're good to go. See how it looks, and we'll call it. Alrighty. And do it again. Thank you for sitting here and watching me go over this. I am FrazierDanger. I'd like to go ahead and read off a few names, people I'm going to thank for helping me over that. We're going to start with Garnet Orb. Appreciate it, buddy. I wouldn't have known about these or taken the time to actually do them if I hadn't met you. Gorbit99. Sir, I appreciate your help. And finally, Pixel. Yeah, I appreciate all your all's help. Enjoy the rest of your evening, day, morning, night, noon, week, weekend, month, year, and we'll see you next time.